Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Here to talk all things hockey are your hosts, Brad Crisco, Ryan Hanna, and Evan Lobsinger.
I'm glad the last game we're going to see for a little while was a good one. I had that thought going into that game. I'm like, this better not be a stinker. Like, this better not just be a shitty game that nobody is happy they spent their Saturday night on. Because we really have big, these games are going to be canceled through Christmas at least vibes right now.
Yeah, it's bad. Well, it was a horrible game. But for once, it was for the other team.
For the other team.
We got to be on the happy end of things.
Because of those cursed jerseys.
That's 1,000% why. It was funny because Crystal was kind of paying attention to the game while I was watching it downstairs, and Mika was watching it a bit with me. She was a little more into it than Crystal was. But Crystal watched probably, I'll say 30 to 40% of the first two periods. And then she caught the graphic when they just put the score up at the end of the second period, and she went, wait, they're playing New Jersey? I'm like, yeah, those are their new jerseys. And like, obviously from the top, you couldn't really see the logo. So I pulled up and she goes, that is so dumb. And I'm like, one, how did you not see these before? They were all over the internet. And two, this is the funniest moment of the day for me by a lot.
I'm broken. There's no redeeming me. Nothing I do or think makes any sense. I think my brain is properly fried because as I was watching that game, I can't keep this thought internal. I can't hide this. I was watching the game and I thought, okay, aesthetically, these don't look terrible.
No, I think from the high up perspective, they look great. I will say they look good. But the problem with the jerseys isn't the actual design of the jerseys. One, that is a very good design. The black and white jersey with the stripes, big fan of that design. Problem with that on New Jersey's jerseys is because those are Chicago's jerseys. They've done that. These jerseys exist. And two, it says Jersey. Like, aesthetically, there's not anything wrong with the jersey. It's just that they're stolen and they still screwed it up.
Well, who is it that they started?
In net? Akira
Schmid, who's not real. It's a creative player. They randomized everything. And no disrespect to Akira Schmid. It's very cool to see, new goalies make it to the NHL, et cetera, et cetera. But the Wings and their ability to play third and fourth string goalies is so funny. So seeing Akira Schmid in net with a jersey that just said Jersey across the front, I'm like, this is NHL the video game. I am not watching television right now.
This is NHL create a player. This is Build-A-Bear for hockey players.
Oh my God. Wow. Yeah, that create a player truly is Build-A-Bear for hockey players.
Yeah, honestly.
Huh. Well, there's lots to talk about from the game, from before the game, from what's going to probably happen after the game. And we have an interview with Max this episode. But before all that, we'd like to say welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast here this morning. And I'd say we are 1/3 less tired and droopy eyed than usual. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
Because I've already got some exercise in me this morning, way more adrenaline than usual. I'm Brad Crisco.
You worked out this morning?
I had a buddy who needed a sub for hockey.
Oh.
And he's a goalie, so he's bailed me out of a few jams. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I can make it work.
You're not made the same as everyone else. I need you to know that.
In what sense?
Like I can't. I could not have done that. An early morning ice time would have to have been planned weeks in advance, not like a last minute, like, hey, I need you in a pinch. There's no chance I'm getting out of bed.
Anybody who plays beer league or pickup hockey, even somewhat regularly, knows that every player in any given game at any moment owes about 9 goalies a favor. So when a goalie messages you, hey, I need a favor, you pretty much have to say yes.
Yeah.
Because they've bailed you out of way worse jams. So
yeah, be good to your goalies.
So yeah, as soon as he messaged me, he's like, we're really short bodies. Can you come out and save us? I'm like, I will try to make it work. And then I made it work.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the Red Wings win over the New Jersey Devils. And where that leaves current Red Wings in terms of performance, where that leaves Red Wings in terms of standings. And then we'll jump into an interview with Max Bultman of The Athletic Detroit that Evan and I did earlier this week before coming back to talk to you a little bit about, maybe, I don't know, who knows, a lot. No one knows anything, so it's all up in the air, about the newest outbreak in the NHL across all sports leagues and what's going to happen in terms of the games being played. This is something that's been going on for a while where I'm not even like trying to be delicate with words anymore because it's such a unfortunately politically charged topic. Everyone's just so tired. I'm like, let's just jump into it. Before we go into all of that fun stuff, I want to tell you about something really, really important. And it's about an organization that we partner with on the Winged Wheel podcast called the Jamie Daniels Foundation. It's a children's foundation initiative, and it was established in memory of Jamie Daniels and founded by Jamie's father and Red Wings lead announcer, who you'll know as Ken Daniels, and Jamie's mother, Lisa Daniels Goldman. They strive to end the stigma of substance use disorder and provide support to those struggling with the disease or who are in recovery. To learn more and offer your support, visit jamiedanielsfoundation.org. And to contribute to our ongoing fund for the Jamie Daniels Foundation, visit justgiving.com/wings, money on the board. Okay. The Red Wings have played a game where I think from almost start to finish. Actually, the first half of the first period was a little rough. They
were getting outshot like 6-0 at one point.
I think it reached like 7 or 8 before the Red Wings got a shot. But through and through, I think looked great against the Devils. So the Red Wings won 5-2 against the New Jersey Devils, largely on the backs of Dylan Larkin and his 4 points, including a hat trick. First of his career.
Surprising. The only stat more surprising is that Pavel Datsyuk never had one in the regular season.
I'm painfully aware of that stat. It hurts me. It's kind of like Datsyuk with his 100 points. He hit 96 2 seasons in a row.
Yeah.
And you just know he could have had it.
Yeah.
But Datsyuk is just always going to, I don't know. Well, hat tricks are weird. Lucas Raymond had a hat trick before Dylan Larkin.
I know.
Lots of players did on the Red Wings.
Hockey's a very weird sport.
Yeah.
Although there's something fitting about 3 players on the Red Wings have had hat tricks this year, and it's just the 3 guys on the top line. And even last night, it's like, yeah, the Red Wings absolutely dominated the Devils and were the better team from start to finish. Yeah, all 5 goals still came from the top line.
It wasn't really until the top line started taking the ice did you see any kind of life from the Red Wings.
Yeah, and hey, credit to Ben Simon, man. He leaned on that top line last night, which was, one of the criticisms we've had of Blashill. But hey, when half your team's the Grand Rapids Griffins, it's probably the right course to take. They're getting a bit of a breather after that, whether or not the season gets shut down. The game Monday against Colorado has already been postponed. So, yeah, you can ride a few guys heavier than normal because they're going to be able to recover after. The one part where it's really notable to me, where I think I even might have tweeted about this because it gave me a good laugh, is when the Red Wings got their first power play of the game, and then halfway through that power play, New Jersey took another penalty. So they didn't score on it, but between the 2 minutes on the first power play and then the extra minute from the second penalty, it was a 3-minute power play. That top line did not come off the ice.
I loved it.
Oh, no, I love it. I love it. I love it. It was great. I'm like, finally to see this. And they had a lot of chances. It was a good power play. They just couldn't get one to drop. I can't remember if Lucas Raymond hit the post or if Schmid made a circus save on that one cross-ice pass. And then the next power play, they came out and played the first minute of it. And then the second unit jumped on the ice and within 10 seconds gave up a shorthanded goal. I'm like, this is why you need to do that.
That shorty was so awkward too, because it was one of those moments where I looked down at my phone for a second, and then all of a sudden I looked up and they were talking about, they zoomed in on a player and they had a goal graphic, like a New Jersey Devils player. I was like, did they score? And it was 11 seconds, and it turns out they did.
Yeah.
So you hinted at this before we talk about the game, and I should have started with this. As we predicted, as everyone predicted, it's not the hardest thing in the world considering what's happening right now. The Red Wings had more players and personnel added to the COVID-19 protocol. So Giovanni Smith, Carter Rowney, Alex Nedeljkovic, all were added to the protocol, as were Jeff Blashill and Alex Tanguay. So that's your head coach and the main assistant coach, all not able to be on the bench. So Doug Huda.
You forgot a player.
Oh, no, I'm going to get to it. I'm just going sequentially here, chronologically.
Okay.
So Doug Huda was going to stay as assistant coach, and then Ben Simon was coming up from Grand Rapids to act as interim head coach, and his assistant coach, Todd Krieger. So, yeah, credit to Ben Simon for coming in and Todd as well, and Doug Huda for holding down the fort. And, I mean, everyone knew, right? Everyone knew that this would happen, but it doesn't change the fact that this is now something that the Red Wings are facing. And just like every team is going through, everyone was asking, what's going to happen next? We'll get more into the conversation about how this affects the league. The spoiler is going to be, hey, there are very few actual public health experts. So a lot of us are just talking heads here, and this is a pretty rapidly changing situation. So we're not going to get too in the muck to say we definitely know, but there's a lot of fair points being made. Like, is it better to just push through it now? Is it better to wait it out and give yourself a little bit of a reset? I don't know.
I'm not an epidemiologist. I've just played one on a podcast for the past year and a half.
That's a good line. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not funny, except for me. I'm allowed to tell you that. Anyways, it was 20 minutes before puck drop. After all that, there's a press conference and everything. What are we going to do? Blah, blah, blah. Everyone's bracing. And they're all right, let's just play this game. Yeah, 20 minutes before the game, Zadina got added to the COVID protocol. And
don't say that name too loud.
Yeah. No, I want to say it was 40 minutes before the game. And I actually thought, I was okay, 40 minutes before the game, I seriously would have put money down that one more player would have been added. And there will be more before, I don't know, midweek, I'm sure, if games are even being played at that point. So by the start of the game, we knew the game on the 20th on Monday against Colorado has already been postponed because they've been beat up by the COVID list, and the Red Wings have all those players and personnel on the COVID list. So that is the tone coming into today, a much hindered Red Wings team. Again, same thing with the Devils. They're a hindered team. Every team's going through it. Yeah, just a weird time.
Yeah. The Red Wings had the benefit, at least last night, of the Devils missing more significant players. So that was a game Detroit definitely should have won. Both teams were about half AHL teams, but the Red Wings had their top line intact, so they needed to win that game running away, and they did.
Dylan Larkin, first career hat trick. He was amped up, man. He was so pumped.
Oh, yeah, he was. I had to laugh at the first goal, though. I'm convinced Filip Hronek is only capable of creating offense from his own zone.
Because that was he just fired the puck.
It was the Zadina move. Fire it all the way down the ice, hope it banks off the boards to the player streaking in, and Schmid played it pretty terribly, but it worked.
I will say, I think that was what Hronek was intending to do, but not off that spot on the boards. I think he wanted more of the flat end boards.
He definitely missed his mark on it, but it worked.
It worked, yeah. So Hronek fired it 200 feet down the ice. It hit the corner. Schmid read that as it would kind of circle around a little bit, and it did not. It is reminiscent of the lively Red Wings boards at Joe Louis Arena. Popped back out to Larkin in front. Easiest goal he'll ever score. And that was great because up to that point, it was a 0-0 game where for parts of it, the Red Wings were getting caved. And you were like, is this the kind of night we're going to have?
Yeah, that first period had every tone of, oh, yeah, it's going to be one of those nights. Because even though Larkin scored that goal, it had that feeling of, there's the momentum change. All right, now the Red Wings could dominate. And the Red Wings did start taking control of that game. Until late in the first period, Thomas Greiss gave up the worst goal of the year. Just an absolute floater from the top of the circles, no screen, no deflection, nothing. Just beats him. And you feel like, okay, you're about to go in the room, and that one goes in to tie the game. That's definitely one that can let the wind out of a team's sails. But hey, credit to the Red Wings. Didn't happen.
Greiss is a rhythm goalie. He needs a starting job, or at least consistent enough nights. Because we saw the same thing at the start of last year in my mind. He wasn't that great really until Bernier went down, and then he turned into a really solid version of himself.
Yeah.
Again, Larkin halfway through the second period, excellent feed from Nemesnikov. Larkin streaking off the bench, buried it. You knew Larkin was feeling it at that point. It's funny, Larkin scored 3 goals, but the biggest goal of the night for the Red Wings was Tyler Bertuzzi's first one, which came like very shortly after Larkin's second goal. Walk us through what Mo Seider did.
He made a play that not many defensemen in this league can make. First of all, not that it was a great pass by the Devils defender on the breakout, but Seider still read it, took it, and turned it the other way. Wasn't the hardest.
Oh, I thought you meant like a great pass to Seider, because that's kind of what it was.
It was. It wasn't the hardest interception in the world. That's the Zach Wilson special there. But Seider took it, immediately turned it, got to the blue line, realized he still had a couple teammates offside, so walked the blue line for just long enough, got the zone. He's become really good at this. It's not like a backhand toe drag, but like almost like what Datsuk did on the breakaway with the backhand pullback.
It's his body.
Yeah, he can turn his body, open his hips, kind of use that backhand pullback to gain some space, gain a bit of extra time, and then he turned and put a backhand pass right through the defender's legs, right into Tyler Bertuzzi's stick in the slot, and Bertuzzi ripped it. It's his timing, his vision, his just complete awareness of everything that's going on the ice at all times is just remarkable. Because the play itself, there was only, in the whole sequence, a half a second where he had to do anything
special,
even kind of skilled. And he did it, as I just described, which was the backhand through the legs pass. But the timing of it all was just perfect. And to have the awareness to not just dump it when his teammates were caught offside, to realize he had some space, walk the line, take it, keep it. And then when he got the zone, held it just to the right moment where the chance opened up, because it was a slow zone entry, which 9 out of 10 times is going to get killed by the defense because it's a slow zone entry. But he just timed everything perfectly. And, obviously credit to Bertuzzi. It was a hell of a shot. Mm-hmm. That's a shot that only goes in maybe 20, 30% of the time, because not many people hit that corner like that. But hey, Seider found him at the right time. Bertuzzi picked the corner, and it was definitely the highlight of the night.
Seider's ability to, first of all, read the play, like you said, like everything that he did there, I was just like, yeah, at 20 years old, man. The part that gets me is how smooth he is on his quick little deceptions, like his quick little stutter, like the opening the hips as if he's going to have like a big deke or like a big transition in his motion with the puck. And all he did was make the defenseman stutter for a second, and then the backhand pass through. Simple, clean pass, like not anything. It was a gorgeous pass. Like if you know what you're looking for, you're like, that is an insanely talented pass. But again, all he needed was the defenseman to stutter, just feed the puck, and that's it. It wasn't some big like deke stick over him, like step around thing. That deception is hard for players to do in motion at NHL speed. It is insanely hard to do when you're the size Mo Seider is. You essentially just had a fridge walk into the zone and put you on a poster. Mo Seider is 20 years old. 20. When you look at some of the most skilled defensemen, young defensemen in the NHL today, you watch them and it's just magic. Like what Quinn Hughes can do, what Cale Makar can do. You're like, oh, wow, that's on another planet. I've not seen defensemen do this. And I'm not saying this is universally true, but oftentimes it comes at the expense of defensive play. Mo Seider is not Cale Makar. Let's put that out there. But Mo Seider can play defense, I would say, better than most, if not all, young defensemen who are at star status in the past X number of years in the NHL. That's what makes him special to me. He's doing this, and he's still reliable and boring in his own zone.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Like, I think I've said this exact same sentence every 6 months for 2 years. The goalposts keep moving for him. Mm-hmm. When you drafted him, oh yeah, good middle pair, defensive defenseman. All right. Okay, maybe he can play on the second power play. Okay, he's probably a first pairing guy. Maybe the number 2 guy can probably run a power play. Okay, maybe he's on the first power play unit. Maybe he's the number 1 guy. Now it's like we've moved the goalpost all the way to, like, he might win a Norris. Like, he could be at one point the best defenseman in the league the way this is going.
I think he's going to get votes this year.
He might.
I don't think he'll be a finalist.
There's a lot of defensemen having really good years, so it's a tough year for him to be doing this. just because of how good Hedman and Makar and Yossi and Fox are, like how good a years those guys are having. It's going to be hard for a 20-year-old, as good as he's been, to unseed them for one of those 5 votes. But yeah, he might get a couple, which is crazy to say.
And it won't be unjustified. Like, if he finishes with this kind of pace, like, okay, Trevor Zegras has gone off a little bit here and he's up in the mix. Lucas Raymond still first with 28 points in rookie points. Trevor Zegras, 25. Moritz Seider, the defenseman, has 21. More than Bunting, more than Dawson Mercer, more than Jeannot, more than Dahlin, more than Drysdale. A defenseman. When people say Seider should win this because he's a defenseman and doing this, they're not necessarily wrong. I'm still of the mind that Raymond is the front runner. I don't even think Seider's third place right now. It's tough.
Is Raymond the front runner?
I still give it to him.
I mean, like you said, Mo Seider's doing that while still being the best defensive defenseman on the team. Not a high bar to clear.
Not a high bar to clear.
But he's playing exceptional defense. He's running the top power play. He's creating a ton at 5-on-5. I mean, he's only 7 points behind Lucas Raymond. And don't get me wrong, Lucas Raymond, also super strong defensive play, which cannot be discounted. So, yeah, like, it's crazy.
The game went on. Kyle Criscuolo got his first career NHL assist by feeding Dylan Larkin, who caught that pass beautifully for the breakaway for his first career NHL hat trick. Again,
who gets that puck?
You have to think they'll just tape an extra puck and give that to Kyle. Unless, I mean, Larks would want to give it to him.
Yeah.
And then Bertuzzi scored a second goal, which is great to see. Bertuzzi's scoring slump was not like him. I think at one point a couple games ago, you said like Bertuzzi's playing kind of uncharacteristically poorly right now. And it's nice that he kind of snapped out of that.
He snapped out of it like 10 minutes after I tweeted it.
Yeah.
Like it was, I forget which game it was, but it was like halfway through the game and I was just watching him like, I didn't want to tweet out that he was flat out bad that game because I just did not want to deal with those mentions, but he was flat out bad for the first period to period and a half of that game. And then I'm like, yeah, he doesn't look like himself. And then it's like he read the tweet because then he just went off like 10 minutes later when it hasn't slowed down since.
Larkin and Raymond and Seider and Nedeljkovic, these guys are all among the most important players in the Red Wings. This Red Wings team is a different team when Tyler Bertuzzi is playing like Tyler Bertuzzi, and that's what he did last night. Scored 2 fantastic rips, 2 goals. It's nice that he kind of broke out of that slump, and the Red Wings ended up winning 5-2. So the energy in the LCA was electric, and the Red Wings improved just like 11-3 and something, I think, at the LCA on the season.
They've the 3rd or 4th best home record in the league.
Yeah, their home ice advantage. Yeah, they're 11-3-2. Their home ice advantage is unreal. And yeah, there's last change and all that, but it's got to be the atmosphere too. Like
it's got to be. I mean, when you can get the matchup you want on that top line, it helps. It helps a lot.
Anyways, that was the Red Wings. Great game to watch. We're not going to see a game until at least the 23rd against Minnesota, if that even happens. And if it doesn't, then we're looking at the 27th against the Rangers. So
that's assuming the whole league doesn't go on pause, because there are many, many teams in way worse positions than the Red Wings right now in terms of guys on the COVID list.
Yep. So we'll chat about that in a second. But for now, I do want to tell you that this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is proudly brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel Sportsbook is a sponsor that gives us hockey fans what we really need, even more excitement. They're easy to use in terms of registration and deposit. Withdrawals are quick and easy. When you win, FanDuel gets your winnings back to you in as little as 24 hours. And they're often running odds boosts and specials every day with some big super boosts each weekend. Now listen to this. FanDuel is letting you place your first bet risk-free up to $1,000. Place a bet on any game and FanDuel will refund you up to $1,000 back in site credit if you don't win. No strings attached. If you win, you keep the cash. If you lose, you get $1,000 back in site credit. What we want you to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app to get started with that risk-free bet up to $1,000. Be sure to sign up with promo code WWP so they know the Winged Wheel podcast sent you. Again, that's FanDuel Sportsbook, promo code WWP. You must be 21 and older and present in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, West Virginia, Indiana, Colorado, Iowa, Tennessee, Virginia, or Michigan. First online real money wager only. Site credit is non-withdrawable and expires in 14 days. Restrictions apply. See sportsbook.fanduel.com for details. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700 in Colorado, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-GAMBLER in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Virginia. Tennessee Red Line 1-800-889-9789. 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, or call 1-800-270-7117 in Michigan. All right. Let's jump into our interview with Max Bultman of The Athletic Detroit. We chatted with him about all things Red Wings, how the season has gone to this point, what's gone well in terms of the rookie stars, what to do with the Fabbri and Zadina situation, what's coming up for Detroit in terms of playoffs, trade strategy, et cetera, et cetera. So always a good conversation with Max. We hope you enjoy. Max Bultman. It's been too long, man. How are you doing?
It has. I'm doing really good, guys. How are you?
Not bad. We're okay. Evan, how are you?
Oh, same old.
I love it.
Max, we're gearing up for the holidays here, and there's a lot. Well, I don't want to say things are winding down. Things are a little bit insane in the NHL, but it's still a good point, I think, to kind of look back and see what has happened for the Red Wings through 2021 so far. So obviously you're front and center in that. Before we get into specific questions, what are your thoughts on this team through the first, however many games we've been through up until we're December 17th recording this? So what are you how have the Red Wings been compared to your expectations coming into the season?
Yeah, I mean, better than I thought, for sure. And it's a credit to them. I mean, a big part of that is when training camp started, I did not see Lucas Raymond on the team. And, I guess you could probably make the case that, they lost the guy who I expected to be their leading scorer, Jacob Vrana, and Lucas Raymond has come in and been their leading scorer. So maybe I just was off base in general, considering that they still, got the leading scorer in there by a different route. But better than I thought, worse than I thought defensively, better than I thought in net, and the top line has been really impressive. I mean, when all three of those guys are in the lineup, I don't know exactly where the numbers are on them right now, but to me, they've got to be a top 15 to 20 line in the NHL. And that's something that the Red Wings have badly needed. I think they had it at times. You saw flashes of it when it was Mantha in there instead of Raymond, but it's been impressive. And I think Pius Suter's been a nice little addition. But yeah, it's the rookies, right? It's Raymond, it's Seider, and it's Alex Nedeljkovic. And, for that reason, they're pretty clearly a better team than I gave them credit for coming into the year.
Talking about Raymond and Seider specifically here, there's a lot of conversations happening about surrounding, maybe the Red Wings did win those drafts. Maybe that was the exact same as the lottery. And based on their performances, I don't think that's unfair at all. How has this changed the rebuild in your mind in terms of accelerating it, or maybe an outlook for Yzerman coming into the upcoming trade deadlines?
It's a good question. I wrote a piece recently about kind of comparing where the Red Wings are right now to the Canucks a couple years back. And it was maybe a little muddled comparison because I was kind of simultaneously trying to compare the kind of 2018-19 Canucks to the current Red Wings, but also with the reference point of the 2019-20 Canucks. That team obviously made the second round of the playoffs. They were a game from making the conference finals. And I kind of use that to make the point that when you get these two big pieces in, Raymond and Seider, and kind of playing the roles of Hughes and Pettersson, you can kind of get yourself to the next step pretty quickly. And that next step being in the playoffs. And I think if the Red Wings really wanted to, I do think they could take that step for next year. The way that they would have to do that would be go out and basically do the equivalent of what Vancouver did, which in 2018-19, which was sign Tyler Myers, trade for JT Miller. But I think if you added two players of roughly kind of that caliber, I don't know if that's Hampus Lindholm and Thomas Hertl or whatever, that's a playoff team if you had those two guys, in my opinion. And I think they could do that, I guess. But the point I was kind of trying to make was if you force it and you do it too early, it's going to be kind of a false start, and you're going to have your setback, and you're going to cost yourself potentially. The Canucks ended up having to give up the 9th overall pick to shed some bad money trying to be good. And, they're hot right now under Bruce Boudreau mania, but, I don't know. I mean, it certainly seems like they tried to kick it into high gear a little too soon. And so I don't know that I made the point explicitly in that article, but one of the things I was kind of trying to get at was you have to let the team tell you when it's time to go big. And I think you keep improving steadily, and I think they will. I think they're going to add potentially Simon Edvinsson sometime next year, whether it's opening night or not. We'll see if Jonathan Berggren is ready to join the lineup by next year. You keep adding prospects. You probably keep adding kind of Pius Suter caliber free agents. They're going to have to find something on the left side. But I think in terms of the big move, that's kind of the key thing is I think you still have to wait for the team to tell you that it's ready to go into high gear. You know what I mean?
Speaking of maybe exceeding expectations this year, another guy who's kind of, we thought we'd have big things with him, but it's Alex Nedeljkovic. Like, he'd only played a handful of games in the NHL, was a Calder finalist, but he's totally blown away all the expectations I had for him. What have you seen from him this year?
I totally agree with you. I mean, so when the trade happened, I, like everybody, was like, wow, this is a chance at a really good goalie. They didn't have to give up that much. I really like Jonathan Bernier, but that was an expiring contract for him. And then it's the 3rd round pick that they got back in the Tatar deal. And so at that point, you're getting a guy who was the 3rd place for the Calder last year, was a really good starting goalie. And I thought, all right, like, here you go. But I also didn't think it was going to happen immediately because I thought going from Carolina to Detroit, you were going to see probably a pretty substantial drop off in what's in front of him. And I think that actually has happened, right? Like we're recording this on Friday evening, Thursday night, Carolina's defense did a pretty good job of keeping things in front of them against the Red Wings. And I think you still saw that Detroit made more mistakes than Carolina defensively, and Alex Nedeljkovic was in goal for all of that. And so I think you've seen it. But I also think Alex Nedeljkovic has just even risen to the level that he can handle them. He's stolen them games at various times this year. He's been a wall for them. He's clearly the starter now. Like, I'm not sure that anybody would have predicted the game share being what it's been through 30 games, where I think Nedeljkovic has played in at least 21 or 22 of them, right? Whether he started all of those, I don't know. It's got to be close to that, right?
Yeah, it's something around there. I can look it up.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, like, he's definitely exceeded my expectations. I have it up right in front of me now. He's played in 21 of the 30 games. So if you would have told me that on the first day of the season, I would have not expected it at all. And I think he's a really good player. And I wrote an article recently about his puck handling. That's an area that, like, I used to hate when goalies left their net to go touch the puck. Like, I used to be like, this, it's not worth it. You never get anything out of it. He has completely changed my opinion on that because I think he's a difference maker and an impact on the game in terms of what he prevents on the other team's forecheck and in terms of getting the puck moving north again, which, you guys talk about, I talk about all the time as like, that's kind of one of the best ways to defend is to just get the puck out quick before you have to do it. And he makes a huge impact there. He steals, grade A chances. He just snags with the glove or with the pad. And I think he's a super impressive goalie. I think the Red Wings got a steal in him.
We were talking about defense, and one of my favorite things that I've done this year was actually helping you out the one time we were watching the Seider game. And that was the first time I've watched Seider closely, as every Red Wings fan has, but really just zeroing in on his game and watching him alone is just, it shows all those small details, the minutia of his game. How big of an impact is it for Seider to already have all of that almost down pat? And what do you see in his game? I think you do this a lot more often.
Totally. I mean, so for one, like, the funny thing about that is the game that you and I did that for people that don't know, I did a game when I was in Boston, when the team was in Boston. I just decided, okay, I'm not going to watch anything except for Seider this game. And so if my tweets for that game were rather bland, that's why. And I needed an assist from Ryan because you watch things happen live and you make your notes, but then you want to make sure that what you're writing is actually what happened. And so Ryan, because he is such a good human, was willing to just kind of clip every shift that I asked him for that I needed a second look at and text it to me so that I could review it all in my hotel room later before I went to hit publish on the story. And that was one of his more boring games. Like, I thought it was pretty indicative of him. I think he had an assist, and he had some really good defensive plays, but I actually thought that was one of the better times that we could have done it, even if it wasn't, we really wanted the first goal, which happened the next game in Buffalo, because I had some color in there about him practicing his shot that ended up getting cut, and he ends up scoring the OT winner one game later. Maybe that would have been the ideal, but I thought that experience of zeroing in on him for a game that maybe wasn't as flashy, it did show you just all the little ways that he kills plays and keeps pucks in at the blue line. And at the end of the day, when you add it all up with Seider, like, the assists are crazy. The points have come quicker than any of us thought. I think I can say that across the board. I know there's some people who will jump into the comments and say that they knew it was coming. If you did, credit to you. But to me, one of the most impressive things about Seider is how quickly he has that little stuff down. He's already one of the best defensemen I've seen in the league at keeping pucks in at the zone that seemed like that's going to get out. And he keeps the puck in on the power play. He does it at even strength. And that extends those defensive possessions that tires teams out, gets them running around, and ultimately leads to goals. And so super smart player, super good at some of those little fine detail elements. I think he's going to get better. He still makes some mistakes. And I think that's almost the most impressive thing about him is that this is not a polished, finished product yet. And he's already this impactful.
Groundbreaking moment for the Red Wings to have a defenseman like that again, and groundbreaking moment for this podcast where someone uttered the words "Ryan is a good human." So that's that's a first for the show.
Right now the Red Wings are teetering in the playoffs, not in the playoffs. We all know how tough their division is. Maybe it's a two-part question. Do you see them making the playoffs? Yes or no? And what would you do? What do you see Steve Yzerman doing in terms of being a buyer or a seller at the deadline?
So I don't see him in the playoffs. I know that, number one, like Boston has a couple of games in hand. So like as of right now, I think they'd be the first team out or the second team out right there with Columbus, right there on the bubble. But the teams ahead of them are all teams that I trust way more than them. I mean, it's Carolina, it's New York, it's Washington, it's Pittsburgh, it's Tampa, it's Toronto, it's Florida, it's Boston, right? Like there's no team in that group that I say, whose odds do you like better down the final 52 games than Detroit. And so, I think they could be close, but I don't think they'll ultimately be in. And I also really think Steve Yzerman is, smart enough to know and disciplined, I guess is maybe more the right word, not smart, disciplined enough to know that even if they do hang around, probably the best thing for the franchise at the deadline is going to be to at least entertain offers. I don't think you need to sell Nick Leddy for best offer. But if, Nick Leddy's on an expiring contract, and if somebody comes to you and says, you can have the second pick back that you gave up for him, why wouldn't you take that? And I think, they answered the question early on Robbie Fabbri, like they signed him to the extension. So I don't think he's going anywhere at this trade deadline. But Vladislav Nemestikov, I think you're going to get into a similar conversation with him. Like last time he was traded, I think it was for a 4th round pick. Like I'm not trading Vladislav Nemestikov for a 4th round pick if I'm the Red Wings, but somebody wants to step up and say, hey, this guy's proven that he can be a goal scorer. He's proven that he can be a complete player. We'll give you what Chicago got from Matthias Janmark last year, which was I think a second and a third. Of course you're doing that, right? So I think he has to be a willing seller, but not an everything must go seller, right? Like he doesn't need to be a fire sailor. So I think that's probably the difference. The goalie market seems like it could be kind of weird. Chicago's out of it and Fleury's on a deal that I guess could be moved, but at the same, and he's like obviously a playoff caliber goalie. But at the same time, like there was that question when he got traded to Chicago in the first place of like, does he really want to move his family? And so like that could be interesting. I don't really know that Thomas Greiss is having the kind of year that's going to get him involved in all that stuff. Mark Stahl, I honestly, I think I'd probably keep if I were the Red Wings. Like, I think he seems like a really good locker room guy, and the price that you'd get for him at this point, I don't even know if it's worth it. So, I think I'd put him in the seller category, but I don't think they need to sell it for whatever the best price is here. Like that, and there were past years where I wouldn't have said that. Like, a couple of years ago when they had Jensen and those guys, I think I was saying hold the line a little bit, but the last 2 seasons where everything was real bad. No, I think it was get what you can. And this year, I think it's only do that if you don't have to move Nick Leddy. Like if you can keep playing him next to Filip Hronek or Moritz Seider, and it's good for those guys. So unless somebody gives you a really good offer, I don't think you have to do anything there.
So you touched on Fabbri in there, and I think you saying he's not going anywhere this deadline is a pretty fair statement for a guy who's just signed. But let's talk about that contract overall.
Yeah.
Nothing too out of this world. 3 years, $4 million a year, no clauses. And he'll be 29 when he wraps up that deal. Knowing the Red Wings timeline and knowing Robbie Fabbri as a player and kind of how flush almost maybe the Wings are at wing compared to other positions, what do you see as long-term trajectory with the team?
I think for the Red Wings to get to where they want to go, he's going to need to turn into a third line player, basically, which is tough because I don't think defense is really his strength. But what he can do is add the goals on that kind of line, right? Like ultimately, if the Red Wings are going to get where they want to go, Jacob Bronner is going to come back into the fold. We'll see what happens with someone like Tyler Bertuzzi. Like maybe I take for granted that he stays in the picture through all this. Like it's totally possible that he still gets traded at some point. or leaves. But, I look at how things fall into place, and I think you probably ideally want Fabbri as maybe a middle six scorer is the right way to put it, where he's a guy who, the reason that I think $4 million, which, I think you guys have talked about, maybe a little high on the sheer side, but it is also all UFA years that they were buying. And it is a guy who's been scoring at a 20 plus goal rate. And you get those guys who score at a 20 plus goal rate, and you put them in the middle six, and all of a sudden you got lines you can roll that are all a threat to score, right? And so, a year or two, I would expect that Robbie Fabbri is probably more in kind of the third line, but I don't think the third or the second line for the Red Wings is necessarily going to be all that different for the next couple of years. And so he probably ages into more of a third line, 15 to 16 minute a night guy. But right now he can be a 17, 18 minute a night guy and be some of your most important secondary scoring. I think it works. And so I think keeping him in the fold, he's had a couple of moments this year, whether it was that shift in the Florida game with the block shots, or he had a hard back check. I think it was in the St. Louis game, actually, where they were down like 2 goals late and they had lost. And it was an empty net, and St. Louis was skating down the ice, and Fabbri back checked his ass off to get back and break it up and keep it like a 2-goal deficit with like a minute left or whatever. And I think you see that stuff, and you see one of the reasons that it makes sense for the Red Wings to have him around is that he's one of the guys who embodies kind of how you want your team attitude to be. And so, I think the contract value is completely fine. I think the word that I used in my story was manageable, because sure, it's totally possible that in year 3 of that contract, people are like, all right, it's a little pricey, especially if the scoring falls a little bit and he's more of a 15-goal player than a 20-goal player. And he has to stay healthy to do that. Like we talked about the scoring. I talked about the scoring rates. I don't think he's actually scored 20 for the Red Wings yet. It's just been at that pace. So stays healthy. That's part of it. Scores at that rate. I'm rambling now, but I think it's a solid deal. And I think he's a piece that is worth keeping around.
All right. Well, let's get to the least contentious and easiest topic on the Red Wings right now, which is Filip Zadina. Obviously, this is a guy who some games you're like, that's not the Filip Zadina I know. And some games you're like, oh man, he is all over the ice. He's probably one of the Red Wings' best players. But in very few games this year have we seen him fill the net, so to speak. What do you make of his season so far? And what do you do if you're Jeff Blashill or Yzerman or Filip Zadina at this point?
How many players do you think have more shots on goal this year than Filip Zadina on the Red Wings? Don't look it up. Just tell me.
I'm going to say
no one. No one.
It's just one. It's just Dylan. He has 71 shots on goal this year, second most on the team. If you told me that fact at the start of the season and that he only had 4 goals through 30 games, I would have been shocked. And I am shocked. Especially the last week or so, he's been so dangerous. I think he had 14 shots on goal over 2 games, and close to half of them had to have been grade A chances that didn't go in the net. And so, at some point, I do think it's fair to say the scoring is not at the level that any of us thought when they drafted him. On the other hand, I think it's also fair to say you keep doing that enough and it's not even going to matter. Like, you don't have to be a 12% shooting percentage guy, an above average finisher. If you're getting that many grade A chances, you can just be a volume attempts kind of scorer. And I think that's what he's going to have to be. Because it doesn't seem like his finishing ability is going to be able to do it on low volume. But yeah, it seems like he's a guy who all of a sudden is generating high amounts of shots on goal and recently high amounts of grade A chances. And if he keeps doing it, I think it's just going to, I can't abandon that outlook on the world. Like, that's, to me, if you create a ton of grade A chances, they're going to turn into goals. And at some point I may have to move off of it, but I'm not going to move off of that easily, because that has proven true as long as I've covered the league. If you keep creating grade A chances, you're going to score goals. There's some guys who score goals without doing that, and those guys are really special. But Filip Zadina to me looks like a guy who, if he keeps doing this, the puck is going to have to go in for him. I do think the shooting talent, I guess is the word I would use, is less than what I thought it was when they drafted him, the first development camp I watched, etc. But he's also evolved his game to a point that he's getting those chances, and I have to think that they're going to start going in. I might be a fool for that. I mean, I understand they haven't, but I think they're going to have to.
Yeah, it was while you were talking, I looked it up. His shooting percentage this year is 5.6%, but he's got the highest shots per game he's had in his career yet.
Yeah.
So at some point, something's got to give, right? Like, I'm just wondering, like, do you see anything behind the scenes that we don't see in the game that he's working on? Like, what's sort of the ground level? I don't even know what process he's going through right now to try and change how things are going.
He is a guy who I've seen over the years spend a lot of time working on the one-timer, and I thought that was a weak area for him in terms of the shooting. And it still probably isn't, it's still not a strength of his, relative to, like, say, Filip Hronek, I think has a great one-timer. I would say Zadina is a guy who, if the one-timer comes, like, I think that can be really valuable. I think his wrist shot, to me, is a little more dangerous. Snapshot, really, even, is probably his most dangerous shot. And you've seen those are the shots that he's had that have gone in the net in past years, where he comes in on a kind of a weird angle and just tucks it under the bar quickly. And so, like, that's, I think, the guy that we all expected to see. And I think we expected to see those once every few games from him, you know, at the time he was drafted. So the one-timer is a thing that over the years, I feel like I've seen him work on. But no, nothing major that I could point to say, like, this is really changed. I think last year was the year that you saw the evolution of his puck hounding. I actually don't know that that's maybe even been quite on the same level in terms of his stick this year. I still think he needs to add muscle, because I think in order to be that kind of player, you have to be able to, it can't just be the stick. It has to be the body too. But I think that's just going to come into, like, he's still 22. He's still skinny. Like, he's going to add muscle for sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. Like, I don't know exactly what the next steps there are, but, you know, I think he's got to keep shooting it. He's got to keep working on the shot, and he's got to keep getting stronger. But by and large, like, what you've seen over the last week or so, and I thought it's interesting do you guys think it's interesting that that's kind of come as he joined the Rasmussen line? Like, that would have been the opposite of what I would have expected.
Well, now he's playing with noted finisher Michael Rasmussen.
Right.
So he's getting like I said on our last episode, he's getting the front row seat to how you finish in the NHL.
But I think it's interesting because I think I always looked at it as he needs these creative playmaking types. And it might be that what it is he needs these big, like, puck retrieval types, because then you get these looks where the puck's coming from below the goal line. And we know that's a really valuable, like, shot generation thing, because it gets the goalie, the defense a little offset. The goalie's got to turn from looking one way to getting their head back to the other. And these pucks are coming in from below the goal line and whatnot, and he's got these chances. Maybe that is something that he needs. Maybe he needs to play with puck retrieval down low types, and he gets to kind of be the finisher in the slot. I don't know. I mean, but I thought that's interesting, because the common knowledge, to me at least, over the last couple of years has been he basically needs a Nicklas Backstrom, and all of a sudden they put him with Michael Rasmussen, who is not Nicklas Backstrom, and
careful with those hot takes. We try to keep it level here.
Yeah, that's right. But it seems like it's done something for him. We'll see if it keeps up, but I think it's interesting.
It's funny thinking about back to the draft about Filip Zadina. If you were to think about who he was at the time, you'd say,
right,
he's more, you know, of a triggerman Ovechkin type than a Nicklas Backstrom. But I see way more creativity in his game right now than I do a finisher. So it's just very funny how things have sort of worked out that way. It's the only thing I think he's really missing from his game is the finishing. It's the
I agree.
Thing I thought for sure would be his one trick pony, but it's
I totally agree with you. I totally agree.
Well, we'll see how the next few months go. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens to the lineup in Zadina, especially when Verona comes back. But before that, one of our favorite traditions over the holiday season is the World Juniors. I know you've done a lot of work on this, and you've talked about this on the Athletic Show. Is there anything that you want to note for Red Wings fans as we approach the World Juniors? Things to look out for, things that you've noticed and that you're excited to see?
I just got to say, like, I wrote about this player a couple weeks ago, just on his college season, Carter Mazur, and he's off to a point per game start at Denver. He was the 3rd round pick this year. I went out to USA camp last week to watch a little bit of it, and he popped for me on the ice there. Like, I think he's going to play a meaningful role for them. He was repping on the power play. His shot is way better than I realized. I saw him make a really nice seam pass on the power play. I think he was repping on the second power play, but a nice seam pass that I don't know if it ended in an assist, but it ended in a dangerous chance. I think I saw him bury a one-timer. Like, I think this guy's going to impress people. And he's a guy that if he's not on your radar, he needs to get onto your radar because I think he's a player.
All right. Carter Mazur, Red Savage is obviously the other American Red Wings prospect.
Yeah.
There.
And that was that for them. Like that's really good to see him because Mazur, they're both picks this year, but Mazur is a year older. He was a re-entry player. So this is his last year of eligibility. And people will say, it's a 19-year-old's tournament. I think it's a big deal for Savage to make it as an 18-year-old too. And he's a guy who I think like it makes sense. Like his profile has always been, he's this really responsible defensive type. And, everybody knows Team USA loves to bring those guys to international tournaments. But I think, he's a guy who they would like to see, I'm speaking about Miami, Ohio now, add some more offense and think he has more offense to add there. And if he does, obviously, that's a big deal for the Red Wings. So we'll see. I don't know that he's going to be in the offensive roles for Team USA. I think, Mazur they could be line mates for all I know, but at least Mazur looked like he might get some power play time. So, both of those USA guys I think are interesting to watch, and everybody knows to watch Edvinsson. He's off to an amazing start. Kosa, I'll be very curious to see for Canada, how he handles that role. And, I think Nedeljkovic's arrival maybe takes a little pressure off of Sebastian Kosa, right? Like he doesn't have to be this like true savior right away kind of thing, but he still has that enormous ceiling that if he's the kind of player that they drafted him, in the spot that they drafted him to pay that off, like that's a big deal too. So we'll see. He's got to have at least a decent shot of starting for Canada, at least some of those games.
Yeah, I would bet that he ends up the starter unless something goes wrong, but yeah. All right. That's the World Juniors. That's Max Bultman. Max, appreciate you joining the show. We'll see how things turn out after the holidays. But until then, have a Merry Christmas. Have a happy holiday. Folks, if you're not already following Max, do it. If you're not already subscribed to The Athletic, Max is worth the price of admission. And no, I'm not just saying that because he called me nice earlier. Genuinely great resource and fantastic pieces. He referenced a couple of them here. Max, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for saying all that. And hopefully see you soon. Hopefully we don't have to wait until the next Winged Wheel pod night to see you guys.
Let's see. Okay. So thank you to Max for jumping on the pod. Lots of really good conversation in there. And I think that's the kind of conversation that's going to keep me pacified if the league does go on pause. So let's talk about that. Very obviously, this thing is ripping through the league at a rate we haven't seen before. And I don't know what the answer here is. I really don't know what the answer here is in terms of what to do. I don't know if a pause is the best option. No one can say definitely because, yeah, it'll give you some benefit, but then who's to say it's not just going to kick right back up? I don't know if pushing through to February is the right option because how are you going to make it there at this rate? Do you push through? Do you sit out? You'd have to think as more understanding about this variant comes out and is properly documented by public health officials across, the different cities that the team in the league plays in or that the league plays in. Protocols are going to be changed as well based on, severity of illness, likelihood of blah, blah, blah. And that's all still to be determined and not by us, the talking heads. So what happens next? Brad, what happens next?
I don't know. I think that's the best analysis I can give. It's going to get worse. Like that's all I can say for certain because 15% of the NHL is on the COVID list right now. So basically, when you have a starting lineup of 5 players and a goalie, odds are one of them has COVID if everybody was playing right now, just to put it in perspective. So I don't know, because it's kind of a win-lose because on the plus side, hey, this is the most mild strain of it we've seen. But the big risk right now that I think the NHL is weighing is it isn't necessarily the players that are the problem. They take it home to their families. Most NHL coaching staffs are of older people. Maybe some of them are high risk. I remember everybody got really nervous when Rick Bowness got it last year because he was high risk. So we can't, it's easy to just look at it and go, the NHL players are going to be fine. So who cares? And if the NHL players were in a bubble right now and it was ripping through them, yeah, I'd probably be in the same boat. I wouldn't care. They're probably going to be fine. That's not the reality of this. It's
It's bigger. The
It's
NHL's
bigger.
weighing something much bigger.
Yeah, like if, player Y gets COVID and brings it home to his wife, who is a severe asthmatic, that's the concern. So what's next? Is it a pause? Is it we're going to have to deal with it eventually, so we might as well just get through it? It could be either. I honestly, and I don't know what the right answer is here. I don't know which way to lean. There's no right or wrong answer here. I don't know what it is. This just feels like it's careening towards a pause.
Yeah.
And, you have the natural break coming up with the Olympics. I mean, going to China right now with this strain.
There's no chance.
There's no goddamn. How is this still a conversation? Like, how many of these players are willing to sit there for 3, 4, 5 weeks in quarantine? It's not a matter of if some of them get COVID. Most of them probably are. Like, the guys who have it now are probably better off because they'll be fine when they get there. Like,
can you imagine we come full circle and just every Olympian is going to get it now? So by the time February rolls around, they're like, what? We're going to be fine.
Yeah, it's like chickenpox right now. Like Dylan Larkin right now is like having a party with Nedeljkovic, Rowney, Giovanni Smith. He's like, give it to me now. I need it now, so I won't get it at the Olympics. Like, it's crazy. This all feels silly because, again, I don't know what the right answer is. So before anybody jumps on me, I understand the argument of it's just going to rip through everybody anyway. We're at the point everybody's probably going to get it. Let's just get used to it. I understand the point of there's still a ton of high risk people out there. We got to take every precaution. I get the arguments on both sides, but what the NHL is doing right now is the one thing you can't do. They're half pregnant. Either shut it down or don't. Like,
I will say,
it's just creating more complications down the line. Either pause it and use the Olympic break and a bit of time at the end of the season to make it up, or you're running AHL teams for the next few weeks. That's just the reality.
That's where I'm going to disagree because I do think what the NHL is doing now is kind of what they have to do. We have very little information, like very little concrete information.
Yeah, everything's early results.
Happened pretty hot and fast. And it's hard. The more games you shut down, the harder it is to save a full season and salvage the off-season schedule and salvage next season's schedule. So as long as they can hold out, guys aren't getting sick and going to the hospital right now, and that's what's important. If they were, then I would say, hey.
Oh, then it's we had a brainer to shut down.
Yeah, if we had a bunch of Marco Rossi's, I'd be like picketing in front of, well, we couldn't go, but I'd be picketing in front of the NHL headquarters. But that's not the case. I kind of understand the whole, let's just squeeze out what we can while we A, learn more, and B, if we have to shut down, I'm sure it's not an easy process to do. I agree. I do feel the sense that the shutdown is coming. Agree or disagree with it, I actually don't even know where I stand because for the first time on this podcast, we're going to admit that we don't know and not just make up an it. Like, genuinely though, like, all kidding aside, it's okay to not know. It's okay to not know what the best course of action is. And like you said, there's pros and cons to all of it. But I do think the NHL is just kind of at this moment figuring it out. I think they're going to use Christmas as a break. There are somewhat fewer games being played around then, and so they're not going to lose as much. And I think they might try to come back just before the new year. They'll want the Winter Classic played. That's
and the All-Star game.
All-Star game. So I don't think that the NHL is going to break for a month. I think they're going to try to use these holidays as a break and come back just before the new year.
But what's the tipping point? They're already canceling a ton of games. So we're already in the realm of makeup games.
Yeah.
Like that, we're already there. It's just, how many is it going to be?
Okay, 20 makeup games or like 10 to 20 makeup games across the league is much different than like 50 to 75.
Do you think these are the last games that are getting postponed?
Though? No, but it's don't even think how many more games are they're going to postpone. How many more Detroit versus New Jersey games can they squeeze through? Where it's like, okay, that Red Wings Jersey game, you can tell both teams weren't working with a full set, but that was an NHL hockey game. And that was fine to watch, and it was fine to play in my mind. And that's what they'll try to do for better or worse. Agree or disagree, they're going to try for as many of those Red Wings Devils games as possible because that is one less massive piece of the pile that you have to sort out later.
Yeah, what I'm looking at right now isn't necessarily a number of games. It's actual time. It's, okay, if we pause, let's say they pause for 3 weeks. Okay. Well, if you can get arena bookings worked out, and I know that's tricky because during the Olympic pause, venues have booked shit, so that might be trickier. But if you can get a 2 weeks worth of games rescheduled in there, and then you only have to add on 1 week worth of games at the end of the season. That's manageable. Despite the number of games, you can fit 4 games into a week pretty comfortably, especially under emergency circumstances. So it's doable. Where they're gonna run into problems is if they keep these half measures and they're just postponing like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games a week for 6 weeks. Those games start to add up real fast. So, and again, I don't have the answer. I don't know what the proper course of action is here, but like, I see the cliff ahead. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, I see it coming, and how much of a game of chicken do you want to play?
I don't envy the position the NHL is in. I think the only reason this isn't March. I know I joked last episode about March 2020. This isn't March 2020. We're better equipped this time. As much as it might seem scarier, the good news is guys aren't getting very sick from this, and that's what's important. And so at the end of the day, it's human. We have to do what's best for people. And it looks like right now, none of this in the world is good. Like, I'm not going to say everyone's in a good situation, but I try not to dwell on something like it's universally applied. Everyone's in this situation. It's shit. And as Mickey Redmond said at the start of the broadcast last night, there's no point in bitching about it. Like, we're not going to change it by bitching about it. Yeah. So this is what we're dealing with. And I think we're better equipped right now than we were in March of 2020. So we'll see what the NHL does. I think it's going to be half pregnant the whole way through. I think you're going to have small pause or pauses, and I think you're going to have a lot of like these Red Wings Devils 3/4 of a team games, and you're going to have a lot of postponed games. And you're going to have maybe some games where, you know, teams go through the worst of it and then are good for a little while. We'll see.
Yeah, the team sad as it is to say, the team right now that's probably best equipped for the eventual playoff run is Calgary.
Yep. We'll see what the NHL does, and we'll obviously cover it on this podcast. But for now, it's a big old. We don't know. Every game that we see the Red Wings play at this point is a blessing, and I won't take any of them for granted.
And they've only had the one game postponed so far, I think, right?
Colorado. Yeah. At the time of recording. I'm sure the moment we publish, the Minnesota game will get postponed too.
I haven't paid any attention to Minnesota. Are they one of the teams getting hit hard or no? Because there was 14 teams as of my last check that had nobody on the protocol list, which is less than half the league. So really think about that. But I don't know if Minnesota is one of them or not.
I don't know. I have a hard time keeping track of everyone. It seems like every minute someone else is being added to the list. They've had games postponed because of the Panthers and the Hurricanes. So they actually haven't, they'll have played less hockey. Okay. With that, why don't we jump into overtime? And overtime on this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast is brought to you by our Patreon supporters. Genuinely, we couldn't do the show and run through the off season and cover the things that we want to cover without you. And hey, even during pauses in hockey like we had last year, the Patreon supporters are the reason the show stayed alive. So patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to help support the show. Mojira says, do you think we'll ever see an NHL team adopt the Sergei Fedorov school of overtime coaching and pull the goalie to go 4-on-3?
You think NHL coaches are that progressive? Get out of here. Only way it happens is final day of the season and a team needs 2 points, absolutely needs 2 points and ROW to get into the playoffs or something like that, where a shootout win does nothing for them. That's the only time we'll ever see it.
Who's Your Dad Nov says, if you could assemble a new Russian 5 for the Wings using active NHLers, who are you picking?
Ovechkin to start.
Ovi.
No questions there. Vasilevsky in net. Well, I guess we'll do a Russian 6 because that one's obvious.
Panarin for sure. Who's going to play center? Because my other forward was Kuch. Because Kucherov, Ovechkin, and
Panarin. Yeah, that one's tough. Kuznetsov?
Yeah.
That was the first one that came to my mind because God knows what Malkin's going to be when he comes back, because Malkin would probably be the answer, but there's a lot of uncertainty around him right now.
I would honestly just go 3 wings and make one of them play center. Who cares?
Yeah, Kucherov, Panarin, Ovechkin. I'm sure one of them can play center.
Yeah. Sergachev
on D.
Provorov?
Yeah, I'm struggling to think of anybody better than Provorov there.
I have a list in front of me. I see Orlov,
No.
Kulikov.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd go Provi there. And then Vasilevsky and net. Oh, God. That's 300 points right there. Oh, this is a good one. Jake Nagy says, my wife and I welcomed our first child, Noah, into the world on Tuesday night as the Wings beat the Islanders. Jake and Mrs. Nagy, congratulations. Very, very happy for you and hope everyone, including Noah and Mom, are doing well. I was 3 the first time my dad saw the Wings win the Cup in '97, and I'm hoping she'll be about the same age when the Wings are competing for their next one. Might be a little bit longer than that, but might as well dream. Any advice for the first few days of fatherhood, Brad?
Sleep when the baby sleeps.
Yeah.
That's literally the only advice I can give you, because everything else when the baby's awake is just going to be staring at the baby and feeding the baby and playing with the baby. So, but the thing is, that's going to be like all hours of the day and night. So when the baby goes down for a nap, you go down for a nap, because just because you may not be super tired at that particular moment, although you probably will be, you will be later. So bank as many hours as you can get.
Our friends are all starting to have kids. There's like 3. We have 3 friends who are babies now. And I realize that's the only thing I care about in the world. I don't care about people. Nothing actually matters. I just want those kids to have a good time always. Yeah. And they're cool. They're very funny. They're cool. They like to hang out with us, which is nice of them. Cool kids. Babies are dope, man. And they're awesome when they're not yours.
And especially when they're at that point where they can't move on their own yet,
yeah.
because it's like, I miss the days of, where's Hank? Where's Mika? Right where we left them.
Right where I put them down.
Because that doesn't happen anymore.
No.
Now silence is the most concerning noise imaginable.
Jeff Blashill's third period playbook says, is Greiss a slow starter or just incredibly inconsistent? Like I said before, yes. I think both of those things can be true. But I think if you have him in a rhythm, he holds it. We've seen Greiss do it time and time again. And even before he was with the Red Wings, when he was on the Islanders, he had much more consistent play time there, I feel, for a lot of the time. He's a little bit more solid when he has consistent reps.
Well, Ned's out now, so here's his chance.
Yeah. Ruthless and Toothless says, I'd love to see a Motor City or Motown jersey for the Wings, maybe a special limited edition release. Either that or Hockeytown. I would love one of those jerseys.
A black and white one with a lot of stripes.
You say that, but you could actually make that work.
Oh, it would probably look sick. But again, it's been done.
Alora Rocks superfan. It's been a while since we had a Rowan comment. Context for this one. Brad plays on a hockey team called the Alora Rocks. It's in a league here in where we live.
Southern Ontario.
Yeah. So I never really know how to describe it. Mars. Rowan says, Alora Rocks superfan says, good day, duds. It's I, Alora Rocks superfan, here to protest the absence of Rocks content. You claim to talk all things hockey in your intro. However, the lack of WOSHL coverage is extremely disappointing when our Rocks have cemented themselves at the top of the mountain after another win Friday, this time whacking the Jets 6-3. After a marvelous start, with plenty of halights, I really hope the boys don't take this for granted and continue to keep their nose to the grindstone and prepare for the slate of games post-Christmas break. I feel like this is our year, given our plus 62 goal differential in only 15 games. That's your goal differential? You're winning by more than 4 goals a game?
We have a 16-0 game on our record.
What kind of Mickey Mouse bullshit is that?
There's one team in our league that probably shouldn't be there.
One troubling thing I've discovered is that our Brad Crisco, whilst going along with 5 goals and 3 assists in 13 games and only 2 penalty minutes, is wearing the number 11. It's hard to ignore the struggles of Zadina this year and how the timing lines up with Brad wearing that number. We have found the source of the curse. God damn it, Brad, this is your fault?
Here's the glimmer of optimism. One, we don't talk about this that often because the last thing I want is you people involved in my personal hockey life because I get chirped by the other teams enough. 2, actually, if Zadina's season kind of mirrors how mine went, it might not be a bad thing because I only had 3 points in my first 9 games and I was on a hell of a slump. I've got 5 in my last 4. So if Zadina can, follow that path, the breakout might be coming.
Hold on. Double back. Do you get chirped from the other team for being on this podcast?
not chirped, but I have a couple guys on a couple of the other teams have pointed, like they know who I am.
If you play in the WOSHL and you're not on the Laura Rocks, I encourage you to bully Brad on the ice for being on this podcast.
Well, it was funny because one time, because nobody in this league, like, we're not going and looking at the other team's rosters and stats before the game. So nobody really knows who's on every other team unless you know the guy. You've played with him somewhere before. You've played against him before. But the first time it happened, it caught me off guard because we were playing, I forget who, and I scored. And so obviously over the PA, Rock's goal, scored by number 11, Brad Crisco. Next shift, I get on the ice. Buddy lines up on the next to the faceoff. He's like, "Are we going to hear about that one on the podcast?" And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? But like in my action, I think I even made a joke to the guy in my please don't tell everybody my secret. And he's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "That I'm actually bad." He had a good laugh out of that one.
That's the thing. As long as you make fun of Brad, it's okay. Yeah. You can approach him however you want. You can say you listen to the show. Well, I can't imagine why. But as long as you make fun of Brad, you're okay. Okay, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We are going to be back with you, our last episode before taking a week off. This is a planned break for us. This is not a COVID break. It's just our once a year we get a week off.
I mean, playing the odds by the time it might be.
Yeah. So the 22nd, the Wednesday, will be our last episode until the 29th, and we'll have a full roster there. Oh, in case you haven't noticed, Evan wasn't here this episode. And we'll be back with you after that. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you to the sponsor for this episode of the Winged Wheel podcast, the FanDuel Sportsbook. And thank you all for listening. Our name level Patreon supporters, sponsors of this show, Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Kyle Kragitz, Nick Perks, Brett Bailey, Terry, driver of the number 69 Crying Ryan Hannah's Banana Slam and Jamathon, Taylor Tadgel, Matthew M. Rice, Brandon M., Carl Brutan and Nanoluski, Chimmy, Citizen High Five, CJ Sully, Clayton Van Dyken, Craig Kibble, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Give Blood, Fight Probert, Greach, Hana Lee, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, Jake Kiefer, Justin and the Angry Mob, Kalen Wood, King Tone, Kyle Hashman, Matt McKay, R.A., Ryan Hubbard, Scott Martin, Stay Fresh Cheesebags, Stacy Lynn, Zach Spring, Zarly Zalapski, Crotch Zipper, Andrew Bohan, Sam Bankson, Adam I Wish I Could Finish Like Ernie, Antonio Gracias, Babe Landeskog, Ben Barron, Connor Leighton, Dave W., Eric Sinkowski, Evans Bingo Card, He's Here and He's Perfect, James Laporte, Jeffrey Dunst, Jeremy Brocker, John Evans, Josh Yelton, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Logan Stull, Matt Keeler, Matt S., Max $1 Million, Pavel Busanevich, Revi DeLuca, Terry Actual, Trevor Pepivar, Zach Handyside, and Zach McCann, a driving range superstar. Thank you all so much, and we will see you midweek.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to check out wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find links to other ways to support the show, such as Patreon, official podcast apparel, and more. And don't forget to follow the show on Twitter at Winged Wheel Pod. And of course, the hosts at Brad Crisco, at Ryan Hannah WWP, and at Hockeytown Evan.